My name is Brian Andrews. I'm the Executive Director for Lakes Area Restorative Justice Project, and uh, it's just a real true pleasure to come and share a little bit about my story and really the impact of choices have had in my life. And uh, we never really understand the depth of or the impact of each one of our choices in life. And so I'd like to just share with you guys today a little bit about the different crossroads and thresholds that I had in my younger years and how that translated out into my adult years. You see, as a child, I thought the greatest trauma I had experienced, because what I ultimately wanted to do is understand what led to the choices that I made. What were the driving forces of the different things that ultimately led into my addiction and led into a life of making poor choices. So going back and looking, there were several different things that happened. One of those pieces was growing up in poverty. You see, from the time I was very young, I didn't realize it when I was younger, but when I got older, I think I was about 8 years old when I ended up being at the grocery store with my mom. And as we were getting ready, I got to pick something out that day, and it was and it was exciting because I didn't get something very often. And while we were getting ready to pay, my mom pulled out this little coupon book, and I seen her pulling out these colored coupons. I just thought it was some kind of checkbook. I didn't really even know. So the guy behind us with his son made a comment that changed my life. He said, "It looks like we're not just buying our groceries today. Looks like we're buying their groceries too." And I was like, what the heck is he talking about? And his son asked that same question, like, "What do you mean, Dad?" And he said, "Well, these people up here don't have money to pay for their own groceries. So they have to use services that we pay for to pay for those groceries." I never felt so small in my entire life as I did in that moment. You see, I was living a life. I had a lot of things going on the inside. I was struggling, connecting, identifying, and socializing with other people. But now I had another barrier. I was being defined by whether I could pay for my food or not. I didn't even want that treat that day anymore. I was just like, not interested at all. You know, as we go into school and you see kids being dressed up in the nicest clothes, I wanted to have that, but I didn't. Sometimes I had pants that were too short. Sometimes I had pants that were too long, and I always felt separated. And so as I continued on, trying to have a relationship with my father was another big piece. From the time I was very, very young, I remember spending time trying to get a hold of my dad. See, the impact of an uninvolved father was another one of those things that became a barrier and a challenge in my life. And so as I continued on, I come home from school and I'd be hurting and wanting to share that stuff with my dad, but I didn't get an opportunity to. And so I kept bottling this stuff inside. And so when I'm thinking about choices, one of the things I want to make sure I'm clear about is who in your life do you have that you can go to with anything? Do you have that one person? Do you have someone that you can share anything with? During that time, I did not. I felt alone, and ultimately it led into my first run-in with alcohol. I think at age 8 was the first time I drank. Parents at the time didn't say, "Don't do that, it's not good for you." They said, "Don't do that because that's mine." And I'm thinking, my parents are fantastic people, but at the same time, I'm thinking, I would have told them a little more. I would have told me a little bit more than that. And but it kept leading into the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And as I got a little bit older, I continued to choose this risky behavior, ultimately leading me to what I call crossroads. You see, I came across a lot of crossroads in my early years, ultimately leading to a reason not to choose left or choose right, but I always ended up choosing left. Driving down the four-wheeler, one of the people while we were drinking and riding four-wheelers went off the road, crashed. Ambulances, police officers, everybody came, and it would have been a great time at that point to realize that maybe I don't want to take this path. Maybe this is going to be the end result of every time I drink, right? And every time I do anything that I know I shouldn't be doing. But nope, I continued to choose the other path, and then the next path. As I continued down that path, wanting to have a relationship with my father was a big priority, and when in 1994, my life radically changed. You see, I was out shooting with my brother and came home we were coming home that day, found out that I needed to hurry up and get to the hospital. I call it the day that changed my life, the longest day. I call it the longest day. And as we got to the hospital, I walked in and I seen people crying and some people laughing. The whole clinic was filled with people that I knew. And the doctor ended up calling us into a room. And in that doctor's room that day, he said, started talking about sodium levels and different things that didn't make any sense to me. But then he said something that did. He said, what I'm trying to say is there's nothing more that we can do for your dad. He had had a massive heart attack. He says, we're going to let one person at a time go say their last goodbyes. At 14 years old, I'm raising my hand saying, well, I want to go say goodbye to my dad, not having a clue what I was going to see. And as I walked in there that day, and I seen my dad laying on the table, his shirt was unbuttoned, and they were pulling electrodes off of him, and I walked up beside him, and his eyes were still open. I was just like, I had ringing in my ears. I took off running out of there, and the ringing got louder and louder and louder until finally everything turned black and nothing but a solid tone in my ears. And I remember just darkness. And I thought, maybe this is another one of those bad dreams again. But it wasn't. It wasn't a bad dream. It was reality. As I awoke, the doctor was right there with a flashlight, shining and making sure I was okay. You see, when I learned later on that my dad had died ultimately from using drugs. You see, I knew he drank and I knew he smoked. I knew that he didn't take real good care of himself, but I didn't realize that he had been using drugs. You see, when I learned that, I made the decision with my friends. We made a pact that we're never, ever going to use drugs. You see, but once again, when we're talking about choices, see, I had drugs over here, street drugs, illicit drugs, prescription drugs. They were all over here, but I had alcohol over here in its own little category. You see, I thought alcohol wasn't a drug. So I continued to drink, and I continued to surround myself with people that drank, and eventually, while ice fishing at age 15, drinking and fishing, someone showed up. You see, if I'm going to share who I really am, if I strip every experience and every decision I've ever made, the core of who I am is a person that wants to help other people. That's why I'm here today. And in that moment, this guy shows up at the fish house and comes in, and I recognize this as a kid from school. And I'm like, okay, well, if he comes in and says, I'm looking for $5 for gas money because I'm almost out of gas. And he says, if anybody wants to give me $5, I'll give them a nickel bag. And I'm like, what in the world is a nickel bag? I had no clue what it was because I was so far removed. I said, well, and then he pulls out this little plastic baggie with this green substance in it. And I'm like, that is not a nickel. It's because I just didn't have a clue. And he says, well, it's $5 worth of marijuana. And instantly my guard went up. I'm like, nope, I'll give you the $5. You can have it. And if you ever pay me back, that's great. If not, that's great also. But I ended up giving him that $5. And as he left the fish house, I seen him set something up on the shelf. And the whole time that whatever it was sat and talked to me. You see, I listened and I kept hearing, just maybe if we just all do it one time, maybe it's just we'll recreate our pact. And well, after a couple more hours of drinking, we ended up going up there, and sure enough, there was that marijuana, and we made the decision that day. We made the decision that day to go and smoke that marijuana. And you see, within a day, I got back to school, and the whole entire school knew that I had used. It was almost like the kids were celebrating that I'd finally made a bad decision that they could recognize or that they could use or hold against me. And then I had other kids that came up to me and asked me, can I help them? Can I help you get that? Or can you help me get some of that? And I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe. So I went and found that kid again, and within a week I was getting drugs for somebody else and became a drug dealer. And so 15, 16, 17, I'm on again, off again, and as soon as the people that cared the most about me, my mother, calls me out and asks me if I'm using drugs, I'm just like, no, you're going to ask me questions like that, I'm going to move out. So at 16, I made the decision to move over to my house. I was out for 3 days, and then I realized it wasn't that good, so I ended up moving back in. And again, at 17 years old, I met a guy that had just gotten released from prison. And it goes back to this choices. You see, I want to help people, and I always want to help people. And this guy here asked to borrow $25, and I look back at my life, and I can identify each choice and each decision that I made that turned my life in a different direction. And this guy asked, "Can I borrow $25?" And I'm like, "What's it for?" "Sure, what's it for?" And he says, "I'll share it with you when I get back." So about 40 minutes later, he ends up coming back and comes in, and he looks at me, and I said, "Oh, you made it back?" And he's like, "Yeah, come with me to the bathroom." I'm like, "The bathroom? Like, people are drinking and people are smoking pot, so why do we have to go to the bathroom?" He says, "Just be quiet and come with me." So I walk with him to the bathroom. My heart's starting to beat a little bit harder now. My mouth's starting to get a little bit dry. And we go in there, he reaches under the sink and pulls out this pink handheld mirror and sets it on the edge of the sink. Instantly, I can feel my heart pounding. And every time I tell this story, I can still feel it, you see. And he takes this little paper bindle and he dumps this white powder out in the mirror. Instantly, it felt like, well, the question to you guys is, has anybody ever scared you or jumped around a corner and scared you so bad that you felt ice dripping down your spine? That cold feeling? Well, that's what I felt when that guy dumped the powder out on the mirror, and I later discovered that it was cocaine. Instantly, I seen a fast-forward film of all the reasons why I shouldn't do it, ending with my dad dead on the table. And then I had this other thought that came through my mind. What was so important in my dad's life that he couldn't answer the phone? What was so important in my dad's life that he couldn't show up? He couldn't fulfill promises. He was uninvolved. Must have been something magical. And that was the reason. That was the basis for my choice that day to ultimately use cocaine. And waited for something magical to happen, and it didn't. And so what do you think? Leave it well enough alone, right? If it doesn't work, maybe it just doesn't work for me. But instead, I give him another $25, and he goes and gets some more. Second time, I ended up getting high. Within a week, I was hanging out with my dad's old friends. Ultimately, it was like a badge of honor when I used it. You see, I'd been offered drugs lots of times, and I was able to say no. I would say, no, I only do pot. I only drink. And it continued to happen. But when I used cocaine that day, it was like a switch. It felt like I was on top of the world until the next day when I wasn't. And I went out to share the last little bit I had with an older guy that worked at the bar that we owned, and he said, "Come and listen to the band on Friday." And so I showed up on Friday night, which was just the following weekend, and the band was taking a break, and he said, "Okay, why don't you come with us? We're going to go for a drive." I'm like, "Okay." So I get in the car. I'm, again, 17 years old. I get in the vehicle, and we're driving away, and we go to this place, and all the guys there, except for the band members, were friends of my dad's when my dad died. So I felt like this connection to my dad. And so I ended up, we went into a place, and one guy says, "How many do we have here?" 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He counts 7. And then all of a sudden, the guy over here says, "No, there's only 6. And so the guy turns around as he's dumping drugs on the table, and he looks back and he says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus me, that's 7. And the guy says, "No, you guys know what happened to Brian's dad. He's not going to do any." And it was the first time that I felt this peer pressure, if there was any in my life. And it wasn't about them pressuring me to use it. It was about, what am I going to look like if I choose not to use it? Am I going to be an outcast? Am I going to be pushed away from the people that made me feel like I was close to my dad? And the guy says, he's old enough to make his own decisions. He says, "What's it going to be, Brian?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course I'm going to." And he said, "You're first." And so as I walked up to the table that day, and I looked at the table, and it's this different colored powder, and I ended up doing it. My whole face felt like it was on fire. Didn't even know what I was doing. I just did it, and ended up finding out that day that it was methamphetamine. So as I'm standing there, and I take my turn, and instantly I have this rush come over me. And for the next 12 hours, I have my best friend who's with me, who I went back to sit with, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, everything's fine." And he said, "Something's different about you." And so I began to try to live this lie. I was awake the entire night. The next morning, as the sun came up, it was the worst feeling in the world. And I would do anything to make that feeling go away. You see, I had a good idea where I knew that guy lived in a building. I didn't know which apartment it was, but I was going to knock on whatever door, however many doors I needed to make the feeling go away. And sure enough, I ended up finding him. Within a week, I learned that I could buy some extra. If I bought some extra, I could get mine for free. And then I learned and met new people. You see, one door opened up after another, and it brought me into this world that I had no clue existed 2 years before. You see, I went from senior class president and homecoming king to the teachers asking me just to leave the school so that the other kids don't get infected with whatever's going on with me. You see, I graduated my senior year, had plans of going into Moorhead State University to become an accountant, and then I got offered a job doing construction that would allow me to continue to live this life that I'd begun living and travel the world at the same time. You see, I look back every time, and $10 an hour doesn't seem like much today, especially for what I sacrificed. You see, I continued to dive deeper. And when $25 worth would last a couple of days, it ended up getting me to a place where it was $1,600 a day. You see, I went from this person who was caring and kind and wanting to help other people to this tragic, just like an infection. You see, I believe that my choices only hurt me and not other people. But as I continued to find that those choices would lead me into relationships with the legal system, my very first time of getting arrested was 3 days in a room with a bunch of strangers, not knowing anything, not knowing what I was going to be charged with. And when I walked out that day out into the courtroom, shackled up, I looked out in the audience, and I seen one person, and it was my mom. And I seen tears flowing down her face, and I'm pointing at the door, telling her that you need to just leave. And she's shaking her head, and she's wiping tears out of her eyes. And I knew that day that my choices weren't just hurting me. They were hurting the people that I cared the most about, the people that cared the most about me. And so I tried to find sobriety, but I struggled. I continued to maybe get a couple days clean, or a week clean, or a month clean, and I fall back down. And it was always because somebody called me to ask me for help. It wasn't always about drugs. Maybe it was about helping them fix their vehicle. And so I go to help fix a vehicle, and the next thing you know, there's drugs around. Or maybe I could just get drugs and sell them, and I won't use them, and that didn't work. Well, maybe I can drink and not use drugs. That didn't work. You see, I continued to go back to the drugs. I continued to go back. Everything I needed to do, whether it was get up in the morning or go to sleep at night and everything in between, I had to use that drug. I had to use methamphetamines to do it all. And it got to a point where I had to go take a UA, and I'm like, I'll just clean up for the UA. It's not a big deal. And then all of a sudden I realized that I could not get clean. And it was kind of like this, like an moment where I thought, I'm in trouble. And it continued to be this downward spiral that ultimately got to the point where I was hospitalized for multiple days. I had multiple cases stacking up against me. I went from, at a young age, of delivering papers to the police officers and being a friend of the law enforcement to being the sole point of an investigation. I've had my doors kicked in. I had my life derailed, but not just my life, my family's life. My mom works in the school, and she's getting asked questions all the time. And so, again, it was just like this ripple effect across the entire community. And then finally, I ended up going into a treatment center, only to get the law off my back. But I didn't realize that decision was going to be I was going to fool myself. I wasn't going to fool the system. You see, I came to this spot, and I always call it crossroads, because I have crossroads and thresholds when it's a life of decisions. And I came to this crossroads while I was in treatment, and I could see who I had been, and I could see the number of people that I infected and impacted. You see, I looked at the number of people just directly that my choices were impacting, and then I looked at every single person that I either sold drugs to or used drugs with, and all the people in their life that were hurting because of their choices. And then eventually I started to see that the magnitude of what I was doing and the impact that it was having, not just in this community or this county, but multiple counties. And all of a sudden I was like, there's one thing I do know, is I don't want to be that person anymore. And that was my introduction, ultimately a real introduction to a higher power. So as I came to that crossroads, I got to discover other people that were figuring out how to work this recovery thing too. And I'm just like, okay, there's came to believe in a power greater than herself. What in the world is that? And so I seen this one guy, and his name is Arnie. And Arnie seemed like he had this down pretty good. So I thought, well, I'm going to ask Arnie when nobody's around because that would be safe. And as I asked him, he said, well, let's just start with this. He says, you talk about your dad who's gone. Do you believe that he's in heaven, if there is a heaven? And I'm like, well, yeah. He said, well, why don't you start by praying to him and then see what happens? And so that's what I ended up starting to do. I started praying to just my dad. Because I wanted to have that relationship with my dad all along, so maybe I can have this relationship with him in the afterlife. And so I started praying to him. And it went from dad to father. And then one day I'm laying out in the courtyard of the treatment center, and I said, okay, we're going to give it a shot. And as I'm laying in the grass, I said, okay, I've been praying to my dad, I've been praying to the Father, and now I'm going to just say, if there is a God, I just need some kind of something to understand whether it's real or not. Just a little bit of something to believe. And in that moment, I had sun land right on top of me out there in the yard, and I was just like, that'll work. And I remember just like I feel it right now. I remember walking out back into the treatment center, and I knew that the course of my life was going to be different. You see, I ended up going to a halfway house for 6 months, and everything was fine. It didn't matter what I needed to do to live a different way. I was going to do it. You see, in my youth, I met this lady, and she was absolutely the most beautiful person I had met. And I said, one of these days we're going to get married. Well, she didn't think so. So she wanted to be my friend. So for years, I ended up trying to have a relationship with her. She said no. But as I began this journey, things started happening that only would happen when we make the right choices. And so I got through the halfway house, and you see, I always wanted to go back to college, so I had to figure out maybe I was just selling the wrong product. And so sales, maybe that's where I needed to go. So I entered into college, which was a big decision for me. And I thought for sure that I wasn't going to be able to get into college because of my brain being destroyed from the drugs, or maybe I'd made too many bad choices to even get into the college. And boy, was I wrong. You see, I was thinking and listening to a lie my whole life, and I was going to do anything I could to try to move away from that. And so I went in and took the entrance exams and ended up getting A's on all the entrance exams. And I started my college career pursuing a degree in sales and marketing and business management. I made the National Dean's List and the National Honor Society. And all of a sudden I realized as I made the decision to put as much energy into something positive, into moving my life forward as I did in that old life, that the possibilities were endless. And I ended up getting my first real job after getting clean and sober, and I'm just like working at a dog food factory. I'm driving this beat up car, and it was the greatest feeling in the world that I was living according to the rules that we are supposed to be living by. And that first paycheck was like the most important thing I'd ever gotten. And about that time, I ended up asking that girl if she would date me. I said, I'll ask you one more time, and then I'll leave you alone. And I still remember it. I'm living in Garden City, Minnesota, and in my backyard is a bridge that only goes halfway across the river, and it was just a telltale of my life at that point. And I asked her, and she said yes. And it was like this amazing moment. I had to get off the phone with her just so I could run outside and hoot and holler and praise the Lord about it. And a couple months later, while I was at work, a 50-pound bag of dog food fell off the conveyor belt from about 50 feet up and landed on my head. Ended up blowing out the discs in my back. I had all these plans and all these dreams, and then all of a sudden I ended up finding myself having surgery right before Christmas that year. As I was being released from the doctor's office, I ended up getting, I was moving up to Brainerd at the time from Mankato, and the doctor was nice enough to prescribe me Vicodin. You see, I had been asked by people, specifically my brother, how long do you plan on staying clean for? And I'm just thinking, I thought this was for life. What do you? And I said, you know, as long as life never gets as bad as it was when I quit the first time. And what I realized is I had created an opportunity in the future for me to use drugs, not even knowing it. And so I had this surgery. I moved up to Brainerd, and I'm still going to school, and I'm still trying to live in recovery, going to meetings, going and making all the decisions that I needed to better my life. And then we had a little one on the way. My first child was born in 2004, and then all of a sudden I went from single life to being in a relationship and having three kids. My wife had 2 kids before that, and the weight of that, the doctors continued to prescribe me Vicodin. Back then, you could go and fill it up as many times as you wanted to. It was setting me up. I got backdoored by my addiction. That's what I like to say. But I continued to climb up. I continued to go to school. I got job offers after job offers. And so I worked at sales at a furniture store, and I did well there. And then I got invited to come and manage a couple of businesses. So first, a convenience store over in Brainerd. I did a ground-up development, and it was highly successful. But what I was doing is I was trying to discover, my worth and my value was tied into performance. And so as long as I could perform and achieve all that was important for this organization to demonstrate outwardly that I was had worth and value, well, then I was doing good. You see, I didn't even realize that it too was a trap for me. You see, I started chasing things down. Whatever the goal was, I would achieve it. I was mission focused. I was driven, and then I ended up getting recruited by another organization to manage their business. So I got hired out of one organization, and now all of a sudden I have ego and pride that is spewing out of me. I went from attending church 3 days a week, which was part of my routine, going to recovery meetings multiple times a week, to this speaking. I got invited to speak, and all of a sudden now I'm on this pedestal where I thought, boy, look at me. Look at me. You see, I thought I was the gift to the world, and I had my own little title that I gave myself, and everybody was praising me all the time, and instead of humbly receiving it, I pridefully received it. And now all of a sudden I got hired on by another company, and I was a Southwest regional sales rep, making a lot of money. I ended up buying a house that's too much, too big, too soon, too fast, and again, it was this outward appearance, trying to have everybody else perceive me in a way that I really wasn't. And so making the decisions to focus on my job, I ended up having to drop out of school because I couldn't manage that. I ended up stopping going to meetings because I didn't have any time for that anymore either. Well, and the last thing to go was going to church. You see, systematically, one after another, dropped off as I put more and more focus on these materialistic things. So I wanted this big house. I wanted to be a top career job, a high-paying job. You see, I chased the dollar, and the dollar took everything from me. It got to a point where we had making over $100,000 a year plus my wife's income, but we were behind on every single bill. You see, I was already in relapse mode and didn't even realize that I was doing that. Lost the car, started getting foreclosure things in the mail around 2009, and then I had this idea that if this guy can't get clean in the treatment center, I'm going to move him into my house because I'll get him clean at my house. See, not even having a clue that I was off on this egomaniac cruise. And while this guy was trying to get clean in my house, or wasn't, I'm not even sure, he heard my wife and I struggling and talking about finances. And he walks up the stairs that day and he says, I can help you. You see, if you just give me this amount of money, I can just go out to Washington and I can pick up a pound of meth. I can sell it for you so you can stay in recovery. I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't sound like recovery to me. But I started grasping at straws. So during this whole period of time, I had myself convinced that I was trying to do things to save my house, to save my family. Ultimately, it was selfish, so I could get drugs. I had an excuse, and then I could use. See, I was setting it up unconditionally, and ultimately, when it didn't work out, I ended up leaving to go do it myself. You see, I didn't have the drugs in my possession. One decision, 2009. I didn't have enough self-control to have the drugs in my possession for 2 hours. I didn't even make it back home that night. I ended up using them before I got home. And in the first night, my wife said, "Something's wrong with me. Did you use?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't. Nope, just Red Bull." And so again, I started burying my life in these lies. And eventually, I'm trying to do a job and do drugs at the same time, and those don't go together. Ultimately, I ended up losing my job, and that was the last final straw on losing my house. And then I ended up losing my mind. You see, I stepped one step closer each time. I took one step closer. Each decision moved me further and further away from my reality. Each decision moved me closer and closer to death and despair. And ultimately, I came to a spot where I believe the only way I could benefit my family is through death benefits. And I couldn't find hope, I couldn't find reason, and I couldn't find direction. And I was too pride-filled to ask for help. And so as I watched all these things get stripped away, and ultimately I ended up going to treatment, coming back out, and starting to use again. I couldn't find the foundation that I once had. And ultimately my family ended up in a homeless shelter, and I ended up on the street. I remember walking back and forth on the bridge, thinking about making an ultimate decision. And I didn't even have it in me to do that, thank goodness, right? As I walked back and forth across the bridge, and I'm diagnosed as disabled. I had these physical disabilities, and I'm waiting for this miracle to cover all, right? To be diagnosed and receive all these benefits. And eventually I ended up in the homeless shelter too. And I remember my addiction progressed until I took everything, and then it brought me to IV drug use. You see, and I remember being in the church using, and I had tears coming down my eyes because down my face because I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop, and I couldn't do anything to get out of that position. If I said I was using, then I wouldn't have a place to live, right? Which is probably practical for everyone in this room, right? If we're using, where are we going to have a place to stay? And so how do we get outside of that? I mean, the pain of staying where we're at has to be greater than the pain of change. You see, I had systematically from 2009 to 2014 had set these thresholds in my life as long as I wasn't doing that bad. And here's the deal. As long as there's food in the cupboard, I'm not doing that bad. As long as the bills are paid, I'm not doing that bad. As long as my kids are going to school, I'm not doing that bad. And I had these little things to help me believe that I was doing okay. I was measuring myself against the worst of worst with addiction instead of the best in life to make myself feel okay. 2 months before I ended up getting clean, I ended up in the hospital for a month dying of an infection, and I still couldn't stop using there. People were bringing drugs into the hospital for me. A month after I got out of the hospital, I helped my wife, who was also using, and she overdosed right in front of me. We load her up into the car. The kids are all sleeping at home. My friend's doing CPR on her on the way to the hospital. I'm crying out to God, begging for him to spare my wife's life or my fiance's life at the time. I will quit. I won't do anything. I was bartering and begging. I would do whatever it took. I would make whatever decision I needed to in that moment to spare her life. And then as we got right in front of the hospital, she sucked in her first breath of air again. And within an hour, I thought if I do just a little bit less than her, it won't be that bad. And again, it continued on. My last threshold, the threshold that transformed my life, was this. As long as I have custody of my kids, I'm not doing that bad. You see, in March, it's really close to an anniversary today, but in March of 2014, it was chaos and destruction. Kids crying, wife's crying, I'm crying, and my fiance crying, and I finally ended up having to just leave the house that day. And I walked down to the neighbor's house and I begged and I cried out to God, just let me die or give me an intervention because I can't do it. and went to sleep that night and woke up the next morning. As I walked back up to my house that day, as I was approaching my window, I could see my less than 2-year-old son standing in the window. You see, I realized something today that I didn't see then. As my son was staring out the window, he didn't even track with me. He didn't even acknowledge that I was walking by the window. Today, if I walk by the window and my kids are looking out the window, they're banging on it, they're making noises, they're making faces. My son almost looked right through me that day. And I came into the house and I took care of me, and then I took care of him, and then there was a knock on the door. And I looked out the window and I seen 2 squad cars parked out in front of my house. And I'm like, today's going to be a bad day. I ended up grabbing my son, I picked him up, went and laid down in the bedroom, put my hand over his mouth because he thought we were playing, something that he always wanted to do. You see, I said I never wanted to become as bad as my dad, but what happened is I became worse than what he was in my life. You see, it grows. Addiction grows from generation to generation. It doesn't get better, it gets worse. And so as I'm laying there thinking of all the things that are about to take place in my life, I can barely breathe. As the officers knock on the doors and on the windows and on the doors and on the windows, and then finally stopped on our bedroom window, and they said, "We can hear a child in there, and we're here to do a child welfare check. You need to unlock the door and let us in, or we're coming in." And I remember, you want to talk about making a decision, I remember that decision was difficult. They ended up, my wife ended up waking my wife up. She went and unlocked the door. They came in, and then the house filled up with officers, task force agents, social workers, probation agents. And as they walked around and seen where my life had become, you see, I might have had these different thresholds but if somebody was to look around the environment that everyone was existing in, because we weren't living, we were existing, they would have realized that that threshold had been met a long time ago. And so the social worker ended up coming to me, and this is the day that my life changed. The social worker said, "Okay, Brian, here's the deal. Your son's going to come with us today, and we're going to be grabbing your other kids out of school. But for your son today, you can help him remember this day one of 2 ways. You have the decision today to help him remember this one of 2 ways. One is you can hand him over and make it exciting and fun and help him to have a good transition. Or 2, we can pull him out of your arms, and he can remember it that way. Both ways are painful, but one way is more painful." You see, when I talk about the pain of staying where we're at being greater than the pain of change, this is it right here. As I'm handing my son over to the social worker, and he's crying for me and calling my name out, and I'm being ripped apart, and I'm thinking, why are you crying for me when I have not been a dad for you? You see, but he helped me to see me. As he was crying and calling to me, I could finally see who I was underneath all the things that I'd done. And so as he went away and I went to jail, I got to begin my life. I got out of jail and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna transform my life, but that's not how it works, right? I began trying to build my life, and there was barriers and roadblocks and more barriers and more roadblocks. But one thing happened is the first day that I got out, I got invited to church. I got invited to a church by a guy who was also my peer, and the power of having a positive person in your life, and making the decision to go, right? And so I went, and as I walked through the door that day, it was just an amazing experience. I expected to start on fire. I figured all of my decisions and all the things I'd done, I expected to start on fire when I crossed the threshold. But what I got met with is a different kind of fire. I got met with the Holy Spirit fire, with someone saying, "Brian, we're so happy that you made it back. We've been praying for you for years." And instantly, like, I felt this old life fall at my feet. Now I didn't stay sober from March 14th until May 21st. I continued to struggle until finally I'd reached a point where I just said, I'm done rolling the dice. It was a big decision that I made that day. And I struggled because at every door that I came to, every barrier, the stigmas that surrounded me, trying to find housing, trying to rebuild this life, and everywhere I came, every direction that I went, I came up against resistance. And finally, I got to the point where we all know it's a big enough chore to try to get clean and sober and stay clean and sober. But to find housing, to prove that you're mentally and fit to be a parent. And through this whole process, I discovered that being a parent's not a right, it's a privilege. And learning the skills, regardless of what the outcome is going to be for yourself. Learning the skills. And so I ended up in May when I had enough. I just called it out and said, I'm done. I'm done rolling the dice on my life. I'm done rolling the dice on my children's life. I'm done rolling the dice on their future, the community's future, and everything else. And today, I put my stake in the ground and said, from today forward, I'm going to do everything it takes. You see, I was facing 48 months in prison. That was their offer. They offered my significant other drug court, which I was resentful for, and they offered me 48 months. So I planned on going to prison. It was hard to try to build your life and build the relationship and get your kids back, and know you're going to prison in 6 months, 8 months. And so I came to this realization, which is impactful and can be impactful in your life too. And it's this, that regardless of whether I do or I don't get my kids back, regardless of whether I do or don't go to prison, what I am going to do, starting today, is I'm going to put one foot in front of the other. I'm going to set goals, small, medium, and large, and I'm going to start pursuing them. The storms are going to come, the resistance, the barriers, everything's going to continue to come at us. But what I can do is I can put one foot in front of the other and continue to walk in that direction. And as I began to do that, all of a sudden I discovered that I reached one goal, and then I reached another goal. And then all of a sudden, I remember I was probably about, 2.5, 3 months clean. At probably 2.5 months, my significant other was in inpatient treatment, and as I was walking to a meeting, this car pulls up and it's this guy, and he says, "Hey, I got a great deal for you." And I knew what he was talking about. He had some drugs for me, and it was the best price I'd ever heard, and as much as I wanted, and I could get it all at no charge or up front. And I remember it was just a successful day that day. I looked at him and I said, "Well, you know what? You're right. That's a great price. But guess what?" I said, "I'm on my way to a meeting. I am done using. I am done dealing. And you know what? If you want to come to a meeting with me, I'd love to have you come along." You see, he said, "No, not today." And 6 months later, he died of an overdose. See, the reality, as I continued to choose life, as my wife got out and she continued to choose life, the people that we used with, there was a group of us, there was 12 of us, and one after another died of overdoses. My wife and I are the only two today that are still alive out of all of our group that we used with. And so there's a harsh reality to it, right? And so as I began to make those decisions, I started to continue to build my life, build connections, and build a network. You see, making these decisions to be better, do better, and help and serve, and all of it together. I discovered along the way that some amazing one-liners that I think are always good, right? Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. You see, when I'm thinking about what we just said, right? Show me my friends. My group of people are no longer alive. Well, that's my future if I continue to use. And so I surrounded myself with new friends. And I walked into a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was the happiest group of people I've ever met. And I'm like, "Do you guys know me or something?" And they said, "Well, are you here for a meeting?" And I'm like, "Yeah, then I guess we do." And it was just like, okay. I could barely say pass when it was my turn during that time. But each time I had people pouring into me, people speaking life into me. And a guy said, this one guy who was still a mentor for me today says, life is like a buffet table. He says, as you're coming around to meetings or you're going around groups of people that are doing good things and they have something that you want, it's a buffet. As you build your life, take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And today, who I am in front of you is a little bit of this person, and a little bit of that person, and a little bit of this person, that all people who have poured into me today. And so as I continued on. We hit this 5-6 month mark, and we had done everything we needed to do to get our kids back. We had gained positive relationships with social workers and community members, and community leaders, but we couldn't find a place to live, right? 36 times. 36 times I filled out an application and was told no. 36 times that I told them the truth on my application. And 36 times I toured a place only to get told no at the end. Those barriers, those stigmas, our backgrounds that continue to follow us forward. But I wasn't going to build my new life on a foundation of lies. And I remember the first second chance that I was given. And as I was actually in the middle of spending time with my kids in a supervised visit, and I got a call from my helper, and they said, you know what, there's another place that just became available. You want to go check it out? And I'm like, nope. And my kids were like, maybe this is the one. Maybe this is the one. And so I went. And I jump out of the car, and I start to tell them about my life, and all of a sudden they were like, or I introduced myself, and she says, what would your last landlord say about you? And I was just like, nothing good. You see, I had a moment of like a millisecond where I thought I could tell them I never rented before. This is the first time. But again, I had this belief that regardless of the outcome, I wasn't going to live a lie. And so I said, nothing good. I said, I'm trying to find a place to rebuild my life because we had been evicted for drug use, and our kids were pulled out of the home, and we're just trying to get a fresh start. And so we did the tour, and I called it the tour because it's like a ride. When you're done, they say you goodbye, and this time they said they would rent to me. I remember being given that key, and as I was on my way back to where my significant other and the kids were at, I seen I got on the phone, I called my social worker, I called the guardian ad litem, and wanted to tell them all. And I walked into the house that day, and I pulled out the golden key. It was like a sword. And everybody's laughing and cheering and exciting, and tears falling down. And that was the beginning. You see, that was the beginning, because I thought if I can get a place to live, then I can do the next thing that I thought was not possible. And the next thing that felt not possible was going back into the workforce. You see, I didn't think that because I was disabled, that meant that I couldn't work. You see, I'm disabled, I can't work was something I used often. But one day while I was walking down the staircase, I received all the feeling back in my legs. My son walked in the door and he said, hey, Dad, did the check get here yet? And I'm like, what check are you waiting for? And he says, well, whatever check comes all the time. And in that moment I realized that's what he's learning from me, that this check's just going to show up. And in that moment I ended up getting feeling back in my legs. I had gotten offered a job from Northern Pines. I'd gotten certified as a peer specialist, but I wasn't going back to work. And after I had the feeling back in my legs, I was left with the thought, now why can't you work? And I ran down the stairs, and I told my significant other what had just happened. She says, what are you going to do? I said, I guess I'm going to work. An hour later, Teen Challenge called, and I ended up taking a job working at Teen Challenge. In that process of going back to work, I got to discover that all the experiences, good, bad, and indifferent, could be used to help other people find their way. You see, I thought I'd wasted these years of my life only to discover that those were the exact things I could use as tools to help other people find hope, direction, and purpose in their own life. And as I started to discover that, opportunities started to open up. And one of the greatest gifts I learned was the gift of service, the gift of helping others, because in that comes connection with others and the community. And community is an important part of all of this journey, whether it's around drugs or whether it's around just trying to rebuild a life. Community is important. And as I discovered that gift of service, I also got to find more things out about myself that helped me to continue to grow and develop and learn, grow, and launch in my own life. And so some of those things that I discovered is that there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. And so when I heard that the first time, I'm just like, okay, all right. So anytime I'm uncomfortable, that means I'm heading into the growth zone. And it was an opportunity to identify. A lot of times when we hit discomfort, we want to turn the other way, right? And it steers us. But I have learned to take that discomfort on full force. To be standing in front of a group of people at any other time in my life would have been something that I'd never been able to do. But today I challenge that discomfort, and I challenge the idea of failure, and all of it helps me to become who I'm supposed to be. And so as I continue to learn, I continue to connect, and I continue to grow, and continue to make the next right decision for my life and the life of other people, I discovered that new doors were opening. You see, when we get comfortable making bad choices come easier and easier and easier. It's a snowball effect. And so when we try to make a good decision coming out of the bad decisions, it's difficult. It's almost like sand in the mouth and stuck in the mud where we're trying to just gain traction and we can't. But as we do, it becomes a little easier and a little easier and a little easier. And before you know it, making good decisions is the easy one. And when the bad decision is you're faced with making one, you're going to question it. And so I had rolled over on the other side, and I started making good choices. And then as I was going along, I also got invited to speak to students, and through that discovered my why. And I have just the importance of discovering your why. It's where passion and purpose intersect. When you learn what are you passionate about, and so that it all ties together with volunteering and service and getting out and discovering new things. If you don't discover new things, if you don't take some discomfort and some new challenges, and we stay with what we know, we don't get to experience the fullness of life. And so as I discovered my why, it ended up leading me into the position I'm in today. And so I want to leave you on a couple of notes. Number one, just because the square peg doesn't fit the round hole doesn't mean that you don't qualify. So I want to challenge you to, if you feel like there's an area in your life you want to go, you want to do something that you want to be, but you're looking at it and it doesn't line up with your life, I want to challenge you to go forward with that. I want you to try it anyway. I want you to fill out the application anyway. I want you to volunteer anyway. Because many times you're going to discover that that's just an outline that someone put there, and other skills will fit the spot or even be a better match altogether. You see, my whole life, if it didn't fit perfectly, I wouldn't do it. If I didn't think I could do it perfectly, I wouldn't do it. And so it held me hostage and kept me oppressed from the fullness of life. And so as I just started discovering these things, I discovered that I'm going to try it anyway. And if it's a no, it's a no. For me, the benefit is if it's a no, it's not a no from a person, it's a no from my higher power. And it helps to steer me in the direction I'm supposed to go. And so I continued to challenge that. I continued to discover my why, and when I found my why, I found my purpose and direction in my life. And I started pursuing and looking for opportunities that ultimately led me to the executive director position that I'm in today. You see, I pledged not to be a leader ever again. What I realized is for a year before I even went into leadership, I had been taking leadership courses in my church. And then I look back and I'm like, I was being prepared, and even though I said I'd never do it, I didn't even know I was going to go to work to so the fact of being placed in leadership in a type of work I never even realized, that had never been a part of anything that I dreamt about when I was a younger child, just goes to show that we need to take the opportunity to discover who we are, get to know who we are, be around people who will speak your truth to you. It's important that we surround ourselves with people that are going to be positive and to help us grow, and challenging us as well. When I look at my life, if people wouldn't have been firm and fair with me, wouldn't have held me accountable, there's a great chance I could have slipped back in the path that I was on. And so, knowing that, I want to challenge you. I have a little exercise for you. It's called The Perfect Life. And so, what I would like you to do is, because we all think that where you're at and where I'm at aren't possible. Because I'd sat in the seats, I've been in the position, and I looked at other people who were living this life that I thought, nope, it's fabricated, it's not possible. So what I want you to do is take some time to write out, if you could live the best life or the perfect life for you, all the details. I want you to dream big, all the details, whether it's from careers to travel to education or experience. I want you to write it all in there. And then I want you to fold it up and I want you to put it away. And then I'm going to challenge you to take the next step, and the next step is an investment opportunity. If I told you I had an investment opportunity that would radically transform your life, with a guaranteed return that would radically transform your life, would you just be pocket change investors, or would you be all in? Yeah, all in. And so today I want you to know that you are that investment. You are the investment every minute, every thought, every action, every relationship, everything that you do from this day forward, going towards the dream life you talked about, is an investment. And I want to tell you that I can guarantee as you pursue that, if you walk through and talk to all the different things that I spoke about today, your life will be radically different in a year. The odds are that the dream that you wrote down on that piece of paper will be microscopic in comparison to what you're actually living. I'm standing here today as a testament to tell you that I had a dream that I thought I'd never achieve. Today I get to live beyond that in a way that I never thought possible. So I challenge you today.